Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking episode 13 of season 6 of Arrow, The Devil's Greatest Trick. All in all, I thought this was a pretty solid episode. Definitely a huge reversal at the end, which honestly I'm really glad about. When they brought in Richard Dragon, Ricardo Diaz, they really kind of built him as like the big bad of this season. And everything we seem to see after that really didn't fit into that. He basically more or less quickly ended up a henchman for Caden James. And here we find out that this was all an act. It was all a plan. And honestly, I'm kind of glad for it. Caden James is not somebody from the comics as far as I recall. He was a good villain, but he didn't really feel like the sort of guy who could carry a whole season. Particularly given the situation of, this computer expert not being able to spot doctored video of the death of his own son. So revealing that this was all Richard Dragon, Ricardo Diaz, messing with everybody in order to play divide and conquer with his enemies, that immediately shoots him up quite a few notches in my book. It really does feel like, we are dealing with somebody who's really smart and has played us from fools from the very beginning. How do we deal with this? So that's a really nasty boat to be in, but it does make for an interesting story. And I did like that they did take out the time to really flesh Caden James out much more as a character. We get to see him during his time with Helix. We get to see his relationship with his son. And, when it's all said and done, when he's realized he's been played, he's actually, pretty graceful about the whole, like, well, okay, I'm beat. Here's your money back, and, hey, I'll tell you what I can about my former associates. And even when Diaz shows up and James knows he's about to die, he tries his best to hold it together. So you can't help but feel a little bit sorry for the guy, even though this guy was basically willing to blow up an entire city full of people just because he was pissed at Oliver Queen. Speaking of blowing up an entire city, Diana still considers saving an entire city full of people to be less important than saving her boyfriend. I mean, she is just completely off the deep end here, still blaming Oliver. She attacks Quentin, who's trying to protect Black Siren. And even when Laurel blatantly lies about having killed Owen, Dinah just immediately jumps on like, yeah, she said it. She killed him. She totally deserves to die, even though it's obvious as hell that she's lying. And Dinah is just itching for any justification whatsoever to just kill Laurel. And this is, of course, an enormous contrast to Quentin, who, despite ample evidence otherwise, still thinks that that Laurel can be redeemed. Now, the fact that she didn't want to kill Vincent is a point in her favor, but nonetheless, it is a complicated situation. You can't just sort of brush off all the things that that Black Siren has done. She's killed a lot of people. She's hurt a lot of people, and most of the time she has completely and utterly enjoyed it. And yet, you can't just write her off as an irredeemable person. There have been moments where she has shown that there is some good left in her. So it is certainly an interesting situation. Curtis and Renee are still not down with the idea of working with Oliver any more than they have to, even though they consistently have to work with Oliver because that's the only way they're going to be able to keep the entire city from going to hell. And it just sort of feels like, despite them having legitimate reasons to be pissed off at Oliver, it really kind of feels petty on their part that at this point they're not willing to say, like, okay, we're our own team, really more or less in name only. So, I mean, again, there are not unreasonable justifications for their feelings, but just the way the whole thing is being carried out. I mean, don't forget that, Oliver gave Renee a compliment, and Renee is just like, yeah, this doesn't change anything. It's just like, man, what do you want? and this is especially galling from Renee, who has effed up quite a bit this season, and in more than one case has really not properly even acknowledged, like, hey, I messed up. So it's sort of like, man, Renee, you've got reasons to be pissed at Oliver, but seriously, man, get off your high horse. You're not in a really that great position to throw stones here. Um, Hilarious little cameo from Barry. I loved that, and of course, it makes sense that he can't stick around and help them because on the Flash, he's supposed to be in jail. You know, he can obviously slip out of there for a couple of minutes necessary to help Oliver and Barry there, but then he has to go right back to jail. So that was a nice touch. And of course, being moved at super speed still upsets Diggle quite a bit, but to his credit, at least this time he managed not to puke. Yeah, the less said about the whole situation with William, it's like, oh, my dad is chasing an insanely deadly terrorist. I'm going to follow him because I want to be with him. It's like, yeah, great you want to spend time with your dad, but, you know, there's a reason why the children of soldiers and cops don't follow them around while they're on duty because, you know, what they're doing is, you know, dangerous. I mean, seriously. This is utterly ridiculous, and a kid William's age should know better. Uh, let's see. Anything else? Anything else? Anything else? Oh, I definitely did like that bit where, you know, Oliver captured Anatole, and Anatole's just like, yeah, okay, take me to jail. Just take me to a jail outside of the city. I don't feel like getting blown up. That was nicely done. That was a good, funny moment. You know, a little bit of the Anatoly that we were so fond of for a while back there, a couple of seasons ago. So, with that said, I think I've covered everything I had to say about this episode, guys. So I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. And please also join me on Tumblr at Jedi Reviewer. Until next time, take care and have a good one.